question.
Yeah.
I don't really know how to say it. Like when you're playing with other musicians, a lot of times I'll notice bass players like really try to get out of the pocket and show off all their, chops or whatever. I don't know what the right word to say.
Yeah.
Like when's the right time to, just stick in the pocket? When's the right time to kind of get more fancy, more melodic?
I asked a guy a similar question. I said, what should I do here? And it was just, that's kind of what we're talking about. What do you think I should do here? This or that. And he looked at me and said, what are you asking me for? And I looked at him kind of, he said, man, if you're really listening to the music, it'll tell you what to do every time. So what he was saying to me is that ask the music, listen to the music, let the music tell you when it feels right to do so. Now that may be kind of a really vague answer, not really getting to where you want to be, but it really comes down to listening to what's going on and, and just it feels right to do that. In other words, if the singer's singing a song and you go into like a blistering fill, does it make sense to really do that there while the singer's like doing their thing? Right? No. You wouldn't do it. So if there's something else going on, like the guitar player's doing a solo, or something else is going on in the song to where, you're supposed to be. The singer's singing, right? Right. So maybe a look from the singer will do it. But really just listen to the music. It'll be really obvious to you, and it may not seem. The more you play, the more experience will help you with this. But it comes down to listening to what's going on, and if there's a hole there, and it feels like the right thing to do, then yeah, do it.
They'll let you know.
Yeah. Well, see, like some bass players like Phil Lesh, Mike Gordon, they're all over the place, but it sounds right. Other types of music maybe that wouldn't work. I don't know. I don't know.
It depends on what you're doing, what the situation is in the song. I mean, there's so many factors that go into that. Experience playing and listening to what's going on will usually tell you when the right time to do that is. Now, if it's yours, it depends on like if you're working for somebody in a cover band, that's probably not going to be the time to do stuff like that because you're supposed to be playing the song, right? But if you're doing like original instrumental stuff in your own band, and it's part of what you hear in that music, then yeah, sure. So a lot of it will have to do with the actual musical situation, the type of band, the type of gig it is. If you're doing, a dance thing, in a club, probably to do that kind of stuff is probably not going to be a good idea.
As a general rule, I think you just don't want to step on anything. About it.
And it comes down to listening, right? You listen to what's going on around you, and if there's a hole and something feels right to do, then go ahead and do it. So there's no absolute, always here or always there. No,
right.
It's always going to, all these things are always going to be relative to the situation of the moment to a degree. But generally speaking, being a bass player, unless it's a bass solo, generally you probably want to stick to the groove of the bass line because that's what you're there for, right? And you stop doing that, and then all of a sudden that whole thing is gone from the music. A lot of solo bass records you hear these days, you'll still, the keyboard player, a lot of Marcus Miller stuff, when he's doing solos, you'll hear the keyboard bass going on. There's still a bass part, even though he might be doing the melody, on the bass itself. Does that kind of get there?
Yeah, I mean, the reason I was asking is like, I usually play guitar in bands, and a lot of times bass players, they're either not creative enough or they're way too creative, not, trying to figure out how to,
Well, depending on who you're working with, gosh, that's a complex question because you also get into attitudes, you get into hurt feelings and all that kind of stuff. You got to be careful, but get them to listen, or maybe just suggest, hey, right here, do a little bit more here. Suggest it to them and let them try to find it. And if they can't, then if you can show them on the guitar, do something more like this and play them an example so they can hear. Or maybe you have a recording of something that you're hearing in your head that this is kind of like an example. Play that for them so they can actually hear it. Because sometimes if you just say more, that's, you know, especially if the player is not very experienced, they're not going to know what you mean.
It could mean anything.
You know, yeah, they're just not going to know. So if you play something for them like this, so they can, oh, okay, like, you know, that might be a good tactic to use.
I know it's a weird question.
No, it's not. It's a very important question, but there's a lot of dynamics that go into something like that. You know, it's not just the issue itself musically, it's the personality of the people involved. You know, is a guy in the mood for it that day? I mean, you know, it's a tough thing, you know. Working in a band can be a very complex series of relationships. Not always pleasant. In a lot of ways, it's like a marriage with 6 people. You know.
And their girlfriends.
There'll be a lot of mistakes made though. I mean, you're not
That's
gonna
when
always
you
get
learn.
it right.
You know,
Learn.
my greatest learning has come from mistakes.
Yeah.
You know, I actually like them. You know, in fact, Victor Wooten has a thing, he actually says, practice making them. Practice playing the wrong notes, so you're not afraid of them. The way you make that work is you groove. Right, so I'm gonna play all the wrong There's not a single note that's right. But it still feels good. Right? Now if I went all the right notes, but it feels like, you know. Which do you like better? I like the solo with all the wrong notes in it better, don't you? So what does that tell you?
Groove always wins.
You're very talented.
Groove. You know, groove is always the most important element of what you play. That no matter what you do, make it feel good. Because if it grooves, it will work. To a point, it will work. Because people generally feel music before they listen to it. You know, they really do. So that if it feels good, I mean, even if you're hitting every wrong note in the book, it's still, there's something there. The music can still survive. It has something to latch onto. And always be in the groove before you start playing. It's a very important point. If you don't know something, like if somebody's playing something that you don't know, groove your way to the answer. Right? So, yeah, I mean, if you're playing, like, for example, let me see.
That should be a bumper sticker, by the way. Groove your way to the answer.
Yeah, I love that.
Now I'm going to change the key of this. I have no idea what key it's going to be. Okay? But I groove my way to the answer as opposed to
So you're basically knocking a little white off. Yes.
yeah, I mean, I just, you know, so you don't want to just like don't, you know, just poke around, then start grooving once you find the note. You groove your way to the answer. Because that way, 9 times out of 10, man, that's a pretty cool fill you did. You might not even know. So groove is always the most important thing. All right, so what is groove? It's like kind of like describing what the color red looks like. You know, well, you have to point something red. Well, okay. Right. So, how would you describe groove? Technically, it's a feeling, right? That doesn't really tell you a whole lot. I would say, for me, if I were to try, my definition of it would be groove is a physical reaction to music. All right, it's analogous to dance. The feeling a person has when they're dancing to a song, they're lost, they're gone in that zone, right? That feeling at that moment is groove. So we as bass players, musicians in general anyway, you know, should we try to recreate that feeling, that dance feeling, you know, so that when people listen to us play, they go to that place, right? So looking at technical aspects of groove. Well, first of all, groove loves consistency, patternization, right? It likes that a lot. Now in 4/4 time, which is going to be probably 99% of what most people play, right? Because most stuff that people listen to and like is in 4/4, right? The rhythmic and harmonic strong beats in 4/4 time are on beats 1 and 3. Now in contemporary music, that does not mean 1 and 3 are felt stronger. What that means is that the most important notes rhythmically need to go on beats 1 and 3. All right? Those are the strongest beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. You know, the main notes need to go there. But in contemporary music, when we play, right, listen to this. Where'd you clap?
All day 10 and 4.
Good. Why there?
It's odd.
A good answer. It feels right. Yeah, that's where it is. That's where the groove strong beats are. Now, in classical music, this is not the case. Groove strong beats are on 1 and 3. That's why it has a completely different feel. Some people say it really doesn't have groove, but it does. You know, you're just not used to thinking about it that way. But in classical music, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, right? In this, all blues, rock, country, all that stuff is on 2 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the first thing to do is internalize this and put a name to it with a count. So actually, I mean, I tell people to practice counting, they look at me funny, but it really does do a lot of good as far as internalizing groove concepts. 3, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 4, 2, 4, 4. See, I don't have to play the groove. The groove does not come from the playing. The groove comes from feeling internally, right? Now, if I were to play, what do you know is happening there? I'm leaning into 2 and 4 stronger, aren't I? Now, it's not hitting 2 and 4 stronger is not it. What's happening there is all that is a reaction to what I'm feeling internally. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and which is why vocalizing and counting and using your voice, because the voice is an instrument that you don't have to think about how to use, right? So you can totally focus on the musical concept, right? So using your voice to practice a lot of stuff is a really good idea. And then just put it on the bass. You know, it's just another instrument, right? But the point is that the leading in those 2 and 4 is a reaction to what I'm feeling. It's not just hitting 2 and 4 loud. That's what happens because I'm feeling it that way. Right? So, and you know, the whole thing about the groove is it's not about playing what you play. In fact, I saw a drummer do a solo and not play a note and get a standing ovation. J.D. Blair, Victor Wooten concert.
Yeah.
Came time, everybody's burning, right? And it comes time for him. He just sat there. About 5 minutes, you know, people started moving. His groove was so powerful, he didn't do a thing but sit there and groove. And then you see people moving, and then people started clapping. And then when the band came in, everybody just stood up. He didn't play a note. And got a standing ovation for a solo. So what does that tell you? Groove, that power of that groove, you know. And it's not about playing. It has nothing to do with the playing. That's just what you add to it. Right? It's very powerful stuff. So if I turn it off, I'm playing the right notes in the right rhythm, but the music died. Am I going to dance to that? I wouldn't. Everything's right, but the groove's not there. I'm not feeling anything. I completely shut it down. Turn it back on. Do it all, man. If that's not there, none of that other stuff matters. So just sit down and practice counting. Let yourself get into that dance feeling. Focus on gaining a deeper awareness of groove and feel. I promise you won't be sorry. All right? Next. Questions?
That, while we're talking about groove, playing in a little side band, and one of the bassists, just that's the very thing he struggles with more than anything, because he's trying to interpret groove. I wish he just heard what you just said.
Well, give my number and tell him to look me up. Yeah.
Okay, that'd be wonderful. Because we're sitting there trying to explain what groove is, and I said, well,
Tell him it's dance.
it's dance.
It's dance. Because if he can dance, and if he's ever been in a situation where he was dancing to his favorite song and just lost and gone in that world,
Yeah.
that is it.
Okay.
So go there.
Well, it's like you don't have to teach a kid to dance. Have you ever seen a little toddler just start moving to the music?
It's a
That's
natural
great.
human
Yeah.
thing, man. That's amazing. Yeah, you're exactly right. You know, who taught, kids just able to walk, right?
How to move.
My daughter, when she was like 2, and she couldn't talk yet, just getting where she can put on something. I didn't show her that.
That's great.
That's groove is a physical reaction to music. That's why I believe that. It's like, you can't help it. In fact, a lot of people say if they ain't moving, it ain't groove. You see people. I'll be playing in bands. I'm sure everybody who's played in clubs will, see people talking. And they'll be engrossed in this conversation, but their foot's sitting there, not without even thinking about it. They have no idea that. So deeper awareness of groove, very, very important.